The church smelled like old wood and fresh flowers. Light from the stained glass windows poured in, painting the pews with colors that danced across the floor. It was a small-town church, the kind where everyone knew each other, and Sunday mornings felt like family gatherings. The pews were filling slowly. Older couples walked in holding hands, young families shuffled in with restless children, and the choir was finishing their warm-up. Soft music from the organ filled the room, slow and peaceful. The air was still, calm. She sat in her usual spot, third row from the front, aisle seat. For years that had been her place. Right where she could see the pastor clearly. Right where the light hit just right. She liked things in order. She liked knowing what to expect. Church was her safe place. A quiet space where the world made sense, even when her life outside didn't. She glanced around. Mr. Lewis, the usher, gave her a polite nod. Mrs. Duffy, across the aisle, smiled softly. Everything was in its place. The pastor stepped up to the front, Bible in hand, preparing to begin. A hush fell over the room. The music faded. It was a moment she loved, that last second of silence before the words of comfort began. But then, the door at the back creaked open, and everything changed. The heavy wooden doors creaked louder than usual. Heads turned, including hers. A man stood in the doorway. He looked worn down, scruffy clothes, wrinkled jacket, boots dusty from long walks, his shoulders slouched like he carried something heavy no one could see. His eyes were tired, far too tired for someone his age. But it wasn't just the man that drew attention. Beside him stood a large dog, a German shepherd, maybe. Its ears were alert, and its eyes scanned the room as if checking for danger. It wore a plain harness, no leash. The animal didn't bark or pull, just stood there calm and still. A wave of whispers rolled through the church like wind through tall grass. "Is that a dog?" someone muttered. "In church?" another voice whispered. "What is he thinking?" She sat up straighter, her hands folded tighter in her lap. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear but from frustration. This wasn't a park or a sidewalk. This was sacred ground. Dogs didn't belong here. The man walked in slowly, the dog staying close to his side. They stepped between pews as if trying not to disturb anyone, but it was too late for that. The room felt tense now. She couldn't hold it in any longer. "Excuse me," she called out, rising to her feet. Her voice echoed louder than she meant it to. "You can't bring a dog in here. This is a place of worship, not a kennel." All eyes turned to her, then to the man. The church went silent. The man stopped walking. He didn't defend himself. He didn't speak, he just looked at her, quiet, with the same tired eyes, and stayed still. The pastor cleared his throat, and stepped forward. "Let's all take a breath," he said gently. "Everyone is welcome in God's house." His voice was calm, trying to bring peace back into the room, but the damage was already done. The woman who had shouted, the narrator, stayed standing for a moment longer. Her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. Her chest felt tight. She wasn't trying to be cruel. She just couldn't understand why someone would disrespect the sanctuary like that. This was a sacred place. A quiet place. Clean, peaceful, holy. Bringing a dog, even a well-behaved one, into the church felt wrong. It broke something. It made the whole room feel unsettled. The man still hadn't said a word. He gave the pastor a small nod, and gently turned, guiding the dog toward the back pew. The dog followed close, still calm, still silent. It sat as soon as he did, head resting on its paws, like it had done this 100 times before. Whispers picked up again, though quieter this time. "Why didn't he leave? Is he homeless?" That dog didn't even move. The narrator sat back down, but her heart was racing. She tried to listen to the sermon, as the pastor began reading from the Bible, but the words barely sank in. She kept glancing back at the man and his dog. Why wasn't he saying anything? Why bring the dog here in the first place? She folded her hands in her lap again, tighter this time. Her jaw clenched. The sunlight from the windows shifted slightly, casting soft colors across her arms, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt off. different. And deep inside her, a small voice whispered, "Why does this bother you so much?" But she pushed it away. She was right. This wasn't how church was supposed to be. As the pastor spoke, his voice echoing gently through the church, her mind drifted away, back to a time she didn't like to visit. Years ago, she had been married. Her husband David was a military man, strong, kind, and steady as a rock. He wore his uniform with quiet pride, and always stood a little taller when the flag was raised. He had a laugh that made everyone feel safe. And he loved dogs. They had one, once. A big silly golden retriever named Buddy. David brought him home from the base, said the dog had followed him around like a shadow. The two were inseparable. Buddy would curl up by the door every night, waiting for David to come home. But when David was deployed again, things changed. The dog grew anxious, restless. Bills piled up. She couldn't take care of him alone, not with everything else. She made the hardest decision of her life, and gave Buddy away to another soldier's family. She never got to tell David. A month later, there was a knock at the door. The accident happened overseas. No warning, no goodbyes. After that, she couldn't look at dogs the same way. They reminded her of everything she had lost. The love, the laughter, the life that used to be hers. And seeing one now, in church of all places, stirred something sharp inside her. It wasn't just about rules or respect. It was pain. Old buried pain. But instead of tears, she felt anger. It was easier. She blinked, pushing the memory away as the organ played softly. The man and his dog still sat in the back. Still silent. Still watching. The final hymn echoed softly as people stood to leave. The man in the back didn't move right away. He waited, letting the others go first, keeping his eyes low. The dog stayed by his side, perfectly still, like it understood they didn't belong. She watched him stand, quietly gathering his things. Something inside her still boiled, not just from the disruption, but from something she couldn't name. She rose from her seat and walked toward the door, but instead of leaving, she turned and waited for him. When he reached the doorway, she stepped forward. "I don't mean to be cruel," she said, her voice tight, "but you should know better than to bring a dog in here. It's not right." The man looked at her for a moment, and then, without a word, he slowly opened his jacket. Inside, tucked into a small zippered pouch, was a photo, old, creased, and clearly well loved. A young version of him, in uniform, stood beside another soldier. And between them, the very same dog, younger, alert, wearing a military vest. Just above the photo, hung a silver medal, shining quietly in the morning light. "She saved my life," the man said, his voice low and steady. "We were ambushed. I was hit. I couldn't move. She stayed with me, even with gunfire everywhere. She barked until help came." The woman's mouth parted slightly, her heart skipping a beat. "She's retired now," he continued. "But I still need her. I get flashbacks, loud noises, crowds. Sometimes, even silence. She knows when it's coming before I do." He looked away, eyes wet. "I didn't come here to upset anyone. I just wanted to feel close to something again. I don't have family. I thought maybe church would help." The woman felt her chest ache. The anger she'd held so tightly began to crumble. She looked down at the dog, now resting quietly at the man's feet. Its eyes met hers, calm, steady, knowing. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I figured," he said softly. "Most people don't." And then he gently zipped his jacket closed. She stood there, words caught in her throat. The photo, the medal, the quiet pain in the man's eyes, it all hit her at once. Her breath caught, and before she could stop it, a tear rolled down her cheek. "I didn't mean to," she started, but the sentence faded. What could she say that would make it right? The man didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence said more than any words could. She wiped at her face, but more tears followed. The soft hum of people chatting outside the church faded into the background. All she could hear now was her own heart, beating fast and full of guilt. "I judged you," she said quietly. "And I shouldn't have." The man gave her a small nod, his expression kind, but distant, like someone who had heard too many apologies, in too many empty places. Still, it mattered that she said it. "I lost someone too," she added, her voice breaking. "He was in the military. He loved dogs. There was one we had to give away, and I never forgave myself for that." The dog, sensing her emotion, stepped closer. Gently, it nuzzled her hand with its nose. She didn't pull away. Her fingers brushed the dog's soft fur, and something inside her broke open. Not in a painful way, but like a long-sealed door finally opening. She saw her husband's face in her mind, that warm, crooked smile he used to give Buddy. The way he'd throw a ball across the yard, laughing as their dog chased it like it was the most important job in the world. She let the memory stay this time. Looking up, she met the man's eyes. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice steadier. "Truly." He nodded once more. This time, it felt like forgiveness. And for the first time in years, her heart felt a little lighter. The following Sunday, the church felt different. Not louder or busier, just warmer somehow. The light from the stained glass windows still danced across the pews, but it seemed softer now, like a gentle touch instead of a bright flash. The doors opened just before the service began, and the man walked in again. This time, the pastor greeted him with a smile and a handshake. He nodded in return, and made his way to the front pew. The dog walked beside him, tail low, movements calm and steady. When they reached the pew, the dog curled up at his feet, like it had always belonged there. The whispers were gone. She watched from her seat for a moment, then stood and walked quietly to the front. In her hand, she held a single white flower, simple and pure. She placed it gently on the pew beside the man without a word. He looked at her, and she smiled. Others in the room noticed. A few more smiles appeared, soft and knowing. Even Mrs. Duffy gave a small nod of approval. The service began, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't distracted. Her heart was still, but no longer heavy. She glanced at the man, then at the dog, peaceful as ever. Sometimes, healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it walks in quietly, on 4 legs, wearing a harness, and carrying stories no one can see. And sometimes, it sits beside you in church. She once thought healing had to come in silence, in order, in keeping everything just right. But healing, she learned, sometimes comes in the form of a stranger, and a dog with patient eyes. She had judged too quickly, spoken too harshly, but in the end, kindness found its way through the cracks. The man didn't just bring a dog into church. He brought a story, a reminder, a second chance. And through him, she found the courage to let go of old pain and open her heart again. Sometimes, grace enters quietly, and changes everything.